So my name is Peter Thomas and I'm Director of Strategy and Growth at CDI, the Conversation Design Institute here in Amsterdam. We're going to talk a bit with Hans van Dam, who's CEO of CDI, about conversational capital, an idea you're going to be hearing a lot more about from us in the next year or so. And today we're going to talk about the ladder that explains why most AI programs stall and why some compound trust while others destroy it. And it's what Hans calls the Holonic Stack. So Hans, tell us a bit about what the Holonic Stack is.
Yeah. So for the Holonic Stack, to understand the first thing is like, what's a holon? And it's something that can be, independent on its own, and it can be part of a bigger whole. And what you see is like elements transcend and include at different levels. So if you look at regular maturity models, you kind of say like, this is the first phase, this is the second phase. But it doesn't really talk about, transcending a phase and including all the legacy from that phase. So when we think about conversational AI, we have 5 levels that we identify, and systems kind of go from functional to trustworthy to behavioral to contextual to eventually memorable. So first, the system works, it's fine. For simpler use cases, it doesn't need to be most advanced. But then as I start getting into conversations that are perhaps more personalized and transactional, trust becomes a more important element of the experience. If a system asks me for my credit card details, I need to trust the system. And as I'm making more complicated decisions as a customer, I want the system to guide me and tell me where I need to go. And then eventually I needed to bring in the context of the conversation. So as I'm kind of growing through these levels, I need to transcend and include all previous levels. And if you think about, people in our lives, a child is born as a baby, becomes a toddler, eventually a teenager, an adult, and then a wise man or a person, but you can't expect a toddler to be an adult overnight. If you do that, then at one point, as an adult, is going to stop functioning and realize there's still a toddler within that person. So you need to clean up every level and integrate it. So you transcend a certain level, you integrate everything that has happened before. Now, in AI, we somehow expect a toddler to be an adult overnight. So we'll build a little chatbot, or maybe it's in the call center, a little experience. It's not great, but we just want to move on to the next phase and add more complexity. Now, let's say I'm at a higher level. I'm in a journey that's longer, that's about my preferences, about maybe a treatment that I'm signing up for, and it's personal to me and it's intimate. And then all of a sudden I ask a simple question, and a very rude comment from an FAQ that was created 2 years ago comes out, and it just triggers me, and it creates a lot of emotional debt in that moment. It's a big withdrawal from your conversational capital trust bank. So what we need to do is make sure that we complete the first stage with your FAQs, that all the content is up to par. Only then do we go to the next level, because otherwise I don't integrate properly and we've got to create a problem down the line. So the Holonic Stack is a way of thinking about maturity in conversational AI, which is about integration and completing different stages before moving on to the next one.
Right. So if you're a leader sat in front of your roadmap, looking at all the agentic capability that vendors are promising, how do you figure out which rung they're using, where they are on that ladder?
I mean, the easiest way to think about the complexity of the journeys that you're creating. So for us, what we do with clients a lot of times is like, what kind of use cases do you have here? And they'll say, well, we've got some of these transactional journeys deeply integrated into our backend systems. Well, then we would say, in terms of agency, what you're trying to do is you're at level 2. Or it's already more behavioral, you might be at level 3. That's what you're trying to build. What we then do is show up and say, okay, this is what we would expect at this level. For a system to speak at this level, you need, if you want to be on level 2, it needs to be very consistent. You need to have a lot of trust markers in there so that people feel comfortable. Certain linguistic patterns that we look for, and if they're there, great, you're operating at that level. But if your roadmap and capability says we want to be level 3, and we do an audit and we see that linguistically this speaks like a toddler, that's when you have a lot of work to do. And then the question becomes, do you scale back a little bit and go down to the level, or do you make a lot of investments to catch up really quickly?
Yeah, I guess what's implicit in this is that maturity is the thing that customers reward. But that kind of cuts against a narrative that's currently in the industry that everything's agentic. So how do you square that with what everybody's talking about now, that everything has to be agentic, and talk about agentic?
Well, your customers don't care about agentic. That's, I think, the main, they have a problem, they need help, and that's all they care about. They don't care if you're using Gen AI, if you're using large language models, or if you have a person that picks up the phone in 10 seconds, doesn't matter. So for you, as you're building out your roadmap, that is what you should prioritize. Who are our customers? What do they need? What's the conversation that we want to have with them? And what can we deliver properly in high quality so that it contributes to conversational capital? Because if I'm just treating it as everything needs to be agentic as much as possible, as quickly as possible, I'm setting myself up for a lot of emotional debt, where I now maybe get a nice press release because we're doing agentic stuff. The next 2 years, I'm going to be cleaning up the mess and paying off the emotional debt that I'm creating with my customers, all because I had a nice, shiny, cool tool.
All right, great. Thank you, Hans. So the Holonic Stack is one of the most practical tools in the tool set of conversational capital. You'll be hearing a lot more about it this year. And if any of this lands with you, check CDA out and think about coming to the Conversational Capital Summit, which is in April 2027 in Barcelona at Norsken House. But for the moment, Hans, thank you.